It is all yours. The platform's all yours. Go ahead, Angela, you go first.
Hola, hello everyone. Like Bertha mentioned, I am Angela Williams and I also work in Savannah, Chatham County. I currently teach 7th grade Spanish at a K-8 school, arts-focused school. And I've also taught elementary and high school, so all levels. And I'm just so excited to be here to connect with you all and to really share what I've learned about social emotional learning, especially the care and policing part, from just amazing stuff from Rebekah as well. So I'm so excited to be with you all and share.
I love Angela so much. Like, I feel like for when she says, I love being with Rebekah, I love working with Angela. So I'm Rebekah Hein, and I teach, currently I'm teaching at Beach. I've taught high school, middle school, and even 5th grade. So a tiny bit of elementary school Spanish throughout the years. And I just think this is just a really important topic because social emotional learning is becoming a buzzword. And it's just really dear to my heart that we do it in a culturally appropriate way, that there's not just one viewpoint that is being the set of rules, so to speak, for how to roll it out. You ready for me to share my screen? Yeah? All right, let's do it. Okay, here we go. Y'all bear with me for a little bit. They were working on my internet today and it looks like the connection's good. All right, there we go. Okay. Okay. It's loading. Oh, and let's see. Okay. Is it loading? It's not pixelated or anything like that? Nope.
Oh, it looks good.
All right, awesome. Oh, okay, just give me 1 second. I apologize. I see that some things did not load like they needed to. Okay, here we go. All right, so what is social and emotional learning? So social and emotional learning, it's important before we define it to remember its purpose. And its purpose is to radically reorganize routine. It is meant to go outside the lesson. So when you go outside the lesson, it can nurture your partnerships between the school, everybody in the school, teachers, students, and then the families, you'll bring that in as well. And then that can expound to the local community. For the individual in your classroom, or maybe even between colleagues, etc., for everybody in the building, it can develop a healthy identity. It helps manage emotions and achieve those goals that we share, as well as those individual goals. Specifically for the learning community, it creates a bond through authentic empathy. And Angela and I talked about that authentic empathy is what's most important to us, because a lot of times people will use empathy to say, well, you need to understand how I'm feeling. That while that's true, that the more that we can understand each other, the better the world will be. Authentic empathy is also a key component, is listening. So authentic empathy means I'm not just doing a checklist to understand what you're saying. I really want to understand, and I want to feel, I want to take in, I want to see your perspective.
Yeah, and I really like how Rebekah really emphasized authentic, because when you're working with students, and I have middle school, 7th grade, so it can be all over the place, but they really recognize, if you are really being your true self, or if you're just kind of, just doing something on the surface. And they can really, know if, okay, wow, this teacher really cares, she really understands where I'm coming from. She really wants to, really understand, me, and not just me, but the community at large. And so I really think that, highlighting that authentic really helps us, especially in the classroom, because, students, they're really keen on picking up those types of things, even if we aren't always conscious of it. And so just kind of keep that in mind too.
That's a great point. And so when we talk about authentic, what does that mean? Because authentic means real. So how can that play out in a classroom? Because a classroom is real, but it's not. It's a snippet of your day. It's a small professional, academic, but yet personal setting. So here are some examples that Angela and I came up with that we feel like are really the kind of the 4 categories that we see playing out in our classroom. So we decided conversational spaces, physical spaces, playful, and reflective. And I would love to hear from you first, Angela, because in middle school, I know that you've got a little bit faster buy-in when it comes to these kind of things.
Yeah, and so we're looking at conversational, that's just really giving the students just kind of the opportunity to just kind of talk to one another, because, our day just flies by. Like, we're in class is over. Okay, next class is over. Okay, next class. And it just goes on like that. And so, students really don't get a chance to kind of have those moments to really be, students, because, from bell to bell, they're focused on instruction and, engaging in that content. And so where's the time, to really be, their age students, especially now after, 2 years or so with virtual, they really, really need that. And so I found, especially this year, that my students are just so open and so willing to just want to have a conversation, about anything. And I love it when I can tie it to, our lesson. If I can tie it to something that we've talked about or we will be talking about in class, then it just makes it so much better. But you also have to keep in mind that you do have some maybe really shy or introverted or even some neurodivergent students that may not feel comfortable participating verbally in the conversation. And so I found examples like using polls through either quizzes or Pear Deck, or even sometimes Mentimeter, and even Google Forms are really ways to kind of allow those students to participate and really share their voice, but they may not necessarily verbalize that day. And so I've just really found that just really making that space and just having that routine in the classroom, that we have like this amount of time set aside to just kind of talk and chat, and then we get back into the lesson. My students really appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to add to how you mentioned that some students just don't feel verbal. Like in high school, I mean, they will talk, but often they walk in with that facade that I don't want to talk. Do I really have to? And so I found that having some physical options, as well as just options in general, things that you can choose from, point to, look at, like Angela mentioned, rating scales. So anything with moving, and it doesn't have to be big. It can be something small, like if you feel this way, stand in this corner of the room. If you feel this way, go to the opposite side. So there's just a lot of different options where you can get students involved. And when you find whatever that is, what that click is for your class, like for my one class, they love doing Would You Rather. And when I got them on their individual sides, then they want to talk to me. They want to express their opinions, because it kind of forces the students to be in a smaller group instead of feeling like they're under the spotlight. And so they're standing next to somebody, they're in a smaller group, but yet they're not alone. So that's a great way. On top of games, there's lots of games, lots and lots of games that we play in high school, in middle school. And I just find that the playfulness of it can help those students who maybe don't feel like talking all the time, or who did grow really attached to their phones through the pandemic. I had a student like that where she wouldn't talk to me at first and she would whisper to her classmate, but now she comes and she checks in with me every single day because I just kept it light and playful, and we took a lot of breaks. We did a lot of music. We had lots of different things to choose from. So she could slowly find herself being comfortable to speak to me.
Yeah, and kind of, piggybacking on that, middle school, we really don't get an opportunity to have a formal recess, built into our schedule. And so we've had to, kind of find time to even just get the students outside for, about 10, 15 minutes throughout the day. But I've also found that incorporating brain breaks into my classroom routine have also really worked wonders, just in really helping to set that community feel, keeping the students engaged. And it's also just something just kind of fun to, like Rebekah mentioned earlier, with the description or, the purpose of social emotional learning, to radically reorganize the routine. And so I found some really awesome brain breaks that we can do in the target language. But then I also have some that, if students want to participate in English, I certainly don't mind. But I really found that even if it's just for, 2 minutes, or sometimes not even 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute, but just to really give them that mental break to kind of reset, and then we can get back to the lesson. And some that they really enjoy. They love the chocolate with the hands. They love doing that one. That's one for the target language. And there's also one that I haven't tried yet, but it looked really fun. It was kind of like rock, paper, scissors, but with like a little trail, like snake of people. So I haven't tried that one yet, but I really want to. But my students just really find, you know, that these brain breaks are just really fun, and, you know, they can talk to one another just for a few, you know, just a few minutes of class, and then we get back into the lesson.
Yeah, I want to add a lot of the brain breaks that Angela mentioned. Like I've had success with them in high school, like including the serpiente. Like they love it, especially if you have some kind of incentive or reward built into your class. And like Angela mentioned, like often our brain breaks are always related to vocab. They're often in the target language, but sometimes they're not. And today we kind of combine that, and we challenged the other Spanish class. And so we set a timer. Okay, after the first 20 minutes of class, we know the other class is coming over, and we're going to play trash get ball, and we're going to quiz each class on the vocab that is pertaining to our lesson that follows. So you can get really creative. And I find that as long as the anticipation is there, as long as the students are looking forward to it, it's part of your routine, it's easy to get buy-in. And especially moving into the last point where it's reflective. For today, when we challenged the other class, my students had been waiting to flex their Spanish skills to the other Spanish 2 class. So we had a very specific goal. And by the way, they also lost. So we learned some reflection on how to work as a team, because even though they knew that they had so much knowledge, like they had to learn how to just get the prompt done. And so we had a great reflection after the other class left, and we talked about, you know, real life skills, academic skills. When you have a deadline, when the rubric says this, what do you do? And they had discredited what one of their classmates said. And so that was that community building where I said, no, this young lady was right. You all should have listened to her and we would have won. So what are we going to do next time? We're going to listen to our classmate. Exactly. So like social emotional learning brain breaks, like they can go so many ways that it's hard to give you a formula for exactly how it will enhance your classroom, because it's so many little areas at once.
Yeah, and then also too, our fourth category with the reflective. So, you know, again, you may have some of those students that, you know, maybe, you know, more introverted, or they may not be comfortable yet sharing with the whole group, or, you know, they may just want to share with you first before sharing out to the larger class. And so even if you have something just as simple as goal setting, like what are my goals for the class for today, by the week, you know, can I use this vocabulary? Can I use this target structure? Okay, you might even want to set them up with the accountability partner if they're comfortable, to kind of see their progress toward meeting those goals. But for, you know, some of your students that may not want to, you know, fully, you know, participate in, say, a conversation, or, you know, they may not even feel comfortable with the physical or playful brain break. Okay, they just might open up and, you know, be a lot more into it if it's something more reflective, you know, kind of that they can control on their own pace.
Yeah, even like I know Angela, I know you are a pro at calendar talks. So even like I'm serious, like even pulling up that school calendar and talking about how many weeks do we have left? What is your grade at? What teacher can I email for you? What teacher can I connect you with? If you finish your work at this time, can I write you a pass? Would your teacher be okay if you go and work on, etc.? So that, you know, just it shows care when you care not only about your classroom, your grade, their progress, but showing I care about your connection to this whole building. That's what builds the community.
Yes, and students, you know, they welcome that. You know, if you ask about another class, or if you know if something's, you know, going on with another teacher and you ask them about it, I know at least for my students, they just seem really shocked. They're like, oh, you know, we have a test in science? Like, yes, I know. And so, you know, it just really helps to strengthen that bond and just really make your classroom just so much more joyous and just, you know, really fun, but also at the same time, academically challenging as well.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and click to the next slide. Oh. Making sure I'm there. Okay, there we go. Yep. So positive teacher and student impact. Go ahead, Angela.
Okay, yeah. And so when I first, you know, started reading about social emotional learning and kind of learning about it, at first, you know, I was really nervous because I really like routine. I really like structure in my class. And so initially this was like, okay, you know, this is another box to check. But I really had to shift my thinking on really what I was doing, instead of just putting this into the routine, instead of just making this like, oh, okay, I got to check this box, let's move on. I really had to think like, how am I using these strategies, or what can I do to really make it fit seamlessly into the routine? I really want to really strengthen not just my classroom community, but the school, to strengthen my students and their relationships with each other, more outside of my classroom. And so I really had to, have that mental shift, instead of just feeling like, oh, this is just one more thing that I have to do. And so once I did that, once I got more comfortable with it, I really found that my students were just much more excited to really learn. They knew that they would have, say, a few minutes here to just kind of have this break, and we would reset and get back into the lesson. And I just really saw that their relationships really strengthened with each other. And especially with this year, this was some of my students' first time, in middle school in my building. They did sixth grade virtually. So this year, this was their first time, stepping into the school building. And with a lot of them, they didn't, they knew them, from the cameras and the screen, but actually seeing them in person, and really getting to interact, some of them were really, kind of struggling. But once we, established those routines, I found some really good strategies that really clicked with my classes. And so I really saw just a lot more positive interaction. They're much more open now. And even with their learning outcomes and their grades in other classes, okay, I've just seen just a lot better performance. And so I've really been just really amazed at what, social emotional learning can do. And as I research and as I look at different webinars and different presentations, I see something else like, oh, I could do this and that looks so good, but I just have to remember, can't do everything all at once. And I've just really been impressed with just how the classroom community and just overall school community too, just really has been changing for the better.
I love how you express that, Angela, because when I think about, I'm a doctoral student too, and there's a lot of different things that I'm researching. And when I think about the phrase hostile interactions and hostile impacts that happen at school, we know that the world is an unfair place. We know that people judge us based on our appearance, based on their own biases, their own assumptions. And so when that student is coming to your class, you have no idea what has happened before. And I think it is it's such a huge gift to be able to give to that child, that no matter what's happened before you come to my classroom, you're going to get a chance to check in. We're going to be playful. We're going to take a brain break. And it doesn't look high energy every day. Sometimes my students are like, Miss Hein, can we be DJ today? And I'm like, yep, I'm going to set the timer, or you can give me 2 songs. Make sure it's, the appropriate version, make sure the lyrics are clean. And they'll teach me about their music. I learned about amazing artists. I had never listened to Rod Wave before this year, and they played this song, the appropriate school version. And it was so deep and poetic. And one of the words connected to our Spanish lesson. So it's amazing how, if you are looking for the connections and you're looking for the bonding and you're looking for ways to say, I welcome you, I invite you into my room. If, however you're feeling, whatever you're going through, I can help you through it. It automatically, I feel like it makes your classroom more rigorous automatically, because you're approached by the students with more ideas. They're asking more questions. They're more involved in the lesson. They're going to remind you of what you did, because you simply have more attention. The buy-in gives you more attention. They're more comfortable. And so when we talk about world language teaching, we know that the effective filter is ready to receive the language. And then you can also be that sanctuary. So if they are having an off day in another class for whatever reason, it's probably not even the teacher's fault. It's probably something outside beyond our control. You can be that teacher that's like, hey, can I come sit in your classroom for 5 minutes? And for me, that's one of the hugest, that's one of the best feelings in the world. I'm like, yeah, sure. Come on, come take your time out in here. And when you're ready, let's get you set up and let's get back to class.
Yeah, very well said. And I just really feel like, once you find, initially what works for you and your students, okay, you'll really see just the impact that it'll have on you and, your classroom, and then even, like you said, school-wide too.
All right. Okay, and that's a perfect way to transition into regulation versus empowerment. And so through different conversations that Angela and I had as not only as teachers, but also as parents, just different things that we've witnessed, like when is SEL used as regulation? You must act this way. Even though you're upset, you have to follow these rules. Even though you're sad, you can't let it out. I need you to keep it in this neat and tidy box. Versus when is it empowerment, where we're learning that management of emotions? We have to realize that humans are messy. Parents are messy, teachers are messy, students are messy, everybody's messy. We're humans, we have off days. So the process of becoming stronger and more confident. So what that means is you don't have, just because you unroll SEL on the first day, does not mean you're gonna have a student who's, yes, all right, I've got my notebook, I'm doing my time management, I'm happy, I'm ready to learn. You're gonna have messiness. You'll have a student one week who like, she can be on top of the world and she's like, that's my girl. And then the next week, all of a sudden she's not talking to you. And that's because that's the human experience. I don't take it personally. And I take it as a compliment that that student is willing to take a risk and be different with me, knowing that she's still safe. And so that's the opinion that I take. And then I use all my teacher tools. I talk to other teachers, we call home, I try to pull her aside, etc. Until finally, you know, she comes back around. So that's different, is where you give the freedom for you're going to feel what you feel. You know, we're going to keep it, of course, like it's going to be school appropriate. You know, of course, there's behaviors that are dangerous. Of course, there's things that we have to address right away. But I'm not here to regulate you. I'm here to empower you. So if you're angry, I'm going to listen with that authentic empathy. And I'm going to say, yeah, that would make me angry too. You know, talk to me more. What's something we can do? What's the next step? How can we avoid that situation? How can we compromise? What can we do? Where are our resources? And it's just a totally different conversation.
Yeah, and I like how you also emphasize with the empowerment versus the regulation, because a lot of times, you know, especially with, you know, classroom management, a lot of times you want to think immediately, you know, how can I control the situation? You know, how can I really manage, you know, the student's behavior? And if you know, really think about that language, you know, that's putting everything on you as the teacher, you know, when you really want to put it on the students. And so when you really think about, you know, how can I help this student to, you know, really see their actions, or how can we look at the situation in a different way and really put it on them? Okay, it really is a different mind shift, and just a different way to really think about how to approach these issues. Because like Rebekah said, you know, I mean, I teach 7th grade, you know, some days they're up, some days they're down. And, you know, it's really knowing them and really, it's really having that conversation with them. And sometimes they don't want to have a conversation, you know, and so you just have to, okay, put it aside for a second. I'll come back, talk to you later, you know, maybe get with your team, or you can, you know, add in other, administrators or counselors as needed, but just really showing the students that you are there for them, instead of just, you know, dismissing them, or like she said, keeping it, you know, all in this neat box.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I like to use the analogy of when a student doesn't have a pencil. Is giving them a pencil every single day, is that care? Or is setting them up with a system so they remember to bring them a pencil themselves, is that care? And I don't think there's an answer to that question, but that's a different perspective to think about, is when I say that I'm caring for this student, like Angela said, am I working alone and they're just following my rules and I'm giving them the rules to follow? Or am I empowering them to have self-advocacy, to express themselves, to take a risk, make a choice, deal with the consequences, and adjust from there? Oh, let's see. There we go. All right. No response is a response.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, you know, you might have students that don't want to participate, or they may come in, you know, one day and you say good morning and they don't say anything. They just walk on by, you know, sit down, maybe put their head down. And I know some teachers, you know, they would really get, you know, really offended at that. And, you know, they would maybe, you know, kind of yell, or, you know, have a kind of negative tone with the students because of that. And so if you really, you again, shift that back to the students, you know, they may not even know, you know, how to regulate, you know, their emotions, or they may not even realize what they're projecting, and, you know, how it affects you. And so I have these 3 little statements here that, the student may need a break or they don't want to respond at the moment. And, sometimes you have your moments, you may not want anyone to talk to you for a second, or you might be processing some things and you just need a minute to calm down. And so the students are the same way. And so I really had to learn that, just because they aren't saying anything doesn't mean that I have to take it in a negative way. They may be, like Rebekah mentioned, something may have happened earlier. They might have had problems at home in the morning, or they may have forgotten something, they really needed, and they're upset about it because I've had students, to forget a project, or, they forgot some homework or just something, they don't have. And, they just aren't, in a really good space. And, they just need time to, kind of sit with that and process. And I've just found, that just really having that understanding and just really knowing that, okay, I need to leave you alone for a minute. You'll come talk to me later, which is what I have with this third point, where it says, try not to take it personally. And that can be really difficult sometimes. You speak to someone and, you're expecting a response, but you don't get one. And so if I notice that coming from, one of the students, then I always make a mental note, okay, I can follow up with them later. And usually when I follow up with them later, they're much more open to talking about what it was, or really saying, oh, Ms. Williams, I wasn't ignoring you earlier. This was, I was upset about this, or, I texted my friend and they didn't text me back. And I mean, in 7th grade, that stuff is so important, right? And so I've just really had to learn that no response really is a response. And then how I react is really going to help determine, what happens next. I found that to be very true.
That's a great point. And I think we have to remember too, that when another human doesn't respond to us, it's all in your perspective, because I could respond in anger. I could get mad at Miss Williams for stepping to my desk, asking me a question, but no response is actually, in my own way, hey, I love you. I don't want to hurt you. So I'm going to keep it right here. And so when you see it that way, it helps you just be more patient, more understanding. We also have to remember that we're teaching a second language for our students, depending on what, course in Spanish you teach. And if it's a novice level, not only are you talking in the target language, you're also asking them about emotions, preferences, etc. There's so many connections happening in the brain. You have to allow students to slow down. And so finding that sweet spot in your class where you have that expectation for response, but then also that safety net where you can take it in, you can take the input in, and there's those nonverbal ways to communicate. Often I like to think about how, me being a parent, I have 4 kids. So I notice when grandparents are over, kids are the most behaved. They're perfect little angels. My parents compliment me on how I raise them. But we know that kids with parents, that's when they test the boundaries. And even though we're not the parents to the students in our classrooms, it's that safety. When they feel safe, they're going to test boundaries. And so that's going to happen. So if I don't respond to Miss Williams, is she just going to walk by, or is she going to come back? Does she really care? So there's so many things happening. And so I think that's a really good point that Angela makes. It's just never take it personal. It's just what happened today. Let's see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah. And I've found, again, that if I do circle back, or, I may not say something right in that moment, I'll come back, they may have forgotten about it and say, oh, you remember that? I'm like, yeah. And so, their mind, could be completely different space, but, I do follow up and, just really want to just check in and make sure that everything's okay. And a lot of times they're very appreciative of it.
And that's such a good point, because I have found I've had a conversation maybe in December with a student, and then we come back in January and I follow up with the same thing, and they're like, you remember that? And I'm like, yeah, I was listening. I remember it. How did it turn out? So yeah, it could just be also what they're used to. You want me to say something, but maybe I'm used to people not really listening. All right, let's see. Angela, do we want to pull up the Jamboard? How are we on time? Yeah?
Yeah, we're pretty good on time, so we can.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to get that up. Are there any questions while I set up screens? Any comments? Any wins that you had in this week, or any challenges in your classrooms?
Hi, I'm glad I attended this this PLC because at my school, well, I'm also from Chatham County and I'm from the e-learning academy. And I have a class when they had this training and I'm supposed to do a recorded lesson using an SEL. So it really, I was from the bits and pieces I got, I was a little bit confused. So this is definitely making it a lot clearer.
I'm so
Awesome,
glad.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad it's making it clearer. So I posted the link. So we're gonna do some actual like work together. We're gonna dig deep. Let's see, and it has some responses. Let's see, Angela, are you in the link as well?
Let's see. I was, but I think it may have kicked me out. So give me just 1 second. I can get back in.
All right. So if you'll help me just clear this out so everybody has a fresh space. So everybody should be clicking on the Jamboard. It's going to open up in a new tab. There we go. So if you haven't used Jamboard before, it's basically a interactive kind of whiteboard. And I know Bertha has done a lot of different sessions on it. And so we'll give you directions from screen to screen. And mostly it's just putting sticky notes on there for us. That's all.
Okay, yes, I'm in now.
Okay, awesome. And I think I have it mostly all set up for everyone. Okay.
Okay, if you have an opportunity to participate, all you have to do is click. And then I don't know if there's a way you guys can share the screen.
I'm doing that now.
So that they can see, because there might be people who are brand new to Jamboard.
And if you're not comfortable doing this, that's okay. Angela and I we'll talk to you. We'll work through it. I know Bertha, you'll help us out. Yeah.
Or you can type it in the chat. If for whatever reason you can't open your Jamboard, you can listen in and then type your answers in the chat. But it's really, really simple. If you just go to the sticky note on the left side of the Jam, you just go to the sticky note that's under the arrow, and that way you can just start typing on the sticky note and then just drag it to wherever you want. That's basically it. Okay.
All right. Okay, so this is our workspace. So again, if technology, if it's just a little bit too much, it's almost 8 o'clock at night, feel free to unmute yourself or chat. This is our dialogue part. This is our workspace. This is where we get to dig deep. So I'm going to read the prompt. Christiana is a non-traditional student who works full-time and is older than her university peers. So this situation is happening at the college level. When she arrives at night class, she's always eating and frequently leaves class to answer phone calls. Some nights she even leaves class early. What social emotional learning strategies can you think of to build a relationship with this student and support her learning in the course? All right. Oh, this is awesome. I see a sticky note already.
I know. I was going to say we have some super fast process.
Yeah, that was so fast. Yeah, SEL is so easy, I think. And it's just like that, just like this person said. So conversational, find a moment to chat with her. She again, like how we talked about, if you don't tell me that you notice me, I don't know that you notice me. Yeah, so finding a moment for how can I help you have that balance between all three areas. That's great. Oh, reflection, goal setting. That's a really good point too, because sometimes our students' goals they're different from ours. We as a teacher, I always want my student to get the A. I always want them to be excellent. But with Christiana, she might have some very realistic goals going for her that in order for her to maintain her mental health, her physical health, it might be different than the professor's goals. Connect with her via email. Yeah, that's great. Just knowing that you can openly email your teacher. I did that so many times in my master's program. Hey, I'm running late. Sometimes I even took a picture. I'm stuck on the side of the road, but I'm on the way. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and in our district, we have It's Learning as our LMS, our learning management system, and it has a messaging feature. So you can message the students or the students can message you. And I found that especially more in first semester when we had so many students, absent or missing class due to illness or, just everything that was going on at the first part of the year, a lot of them would, message me on It's Learning, asking about links and, assignments and different questions. And so if you have like some type of system that your school or district uses, okay, your students might be comfortable with that.
Yes. Yeah. And I love the responses from this group of educators. Y'all are phenomenal. Because even like through the pandemic, when students might not have had their camera on, when they came back in the building, just having that open email messaging system, like Angela described, they run up to you and they're like, hey, and you don't recognize who they are because you never saw their face sometimes. But yeah, it's a great point. It means so much to the human heart for that connection. And I think we have one more sticky note.
Yeah, it says, I was a non-traditional student taking physics at night while pregnant, so I appreciated that my professor respected my situation. And there you go,
Yes.
it's that one-on-one, the way that you handle one student may not necessarily be the way that you handle another student. And if you have your environment set up in that type of way, then students understand that, and it's just a flow, and they really appreciate that.
Yes.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, whoever said connect with her via email, like for some of us, it may be like, oh well, it's an email, but it means so much. Like you have no idea how many times my students have told me, oh, X teacher doesn't notice when I'm not in class. They feel like we don't notice. So the fact that we do message them, even if it's just like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that we miss you in class and this is what we did today. I mean, you don't have to give them the whole lesson plan, but just like, and I'll be happy to catch up with you when you get back. Just something brief like that it lets the student, you are seen, because many times they don't feel seen. And as simple as an email, as it's mentioned here on the screen, it's just so powerful.
Absolutely. That's a great point. All right, so our second prompt, here's another example of SEL. So with Christiana, with her classmates, this might be a great question to ask. How do you wind down at the end of the day? So we would like to ask you all, how do you wind down at the end of the day? So if you want to unmute your mic, if you want to leave it in the chat, it looks like we're mostly comfortable with the sticky notes. Feel free to add a sticky note. I think Angela and we still have our sticky notes, don't we? Oh no, they got deleted. Okay, so Angela, let's add our sticky notes.
Yeah, I'm going to add mine.
Okay. All right, Miss Angela doing yoga.
Yeah. I really got into it, during the first part of the pandemic of 2020, and my daughter and I, we actually do it together. And I mean, at first I was like, oh, this isn't going to be, worth my time. But the 10 to 15 minutes, it is so worth it. Like it just relaxes me, calms me down. It really gets me into this, space where I'm ready for bed instead of feeling like anxious and nervous. So I'm so grateful that we started doing yoga together.
We started doing yoga over spring break, me with all my 4 kids, ages 3 to almost 12. And it is amazing how yoga is so powerful in a household. I told my daughter, I said, listen, if you can't be calm, you can't come and do yoga. You have to be calm to do yoga. And she's like, I want to do yoga. And it's just amazing, the tools. All right, let's see. I added practicing my ukulele. I try to be a musician. I'm not so good. And then drawing. I love drawing with my youngest. And we've got some others. Let's see. Social media, looking at pics of family and friends. That's so important. Like that is a true dopamine rush. When you see family, friends, cute pictures, it's important. All right, let's see. And we've got one more. Walk around the school with a colleague after school. I love it. I tried to start a walking club not that long ago, but then the pandemic happened. So in the evening, watch a favorite TV show. Listen, we make over 1,000 decisions a day. Zoning out for a teacher is important. I also found that I have to play video games now. I'm a kid of the 90s. And so that moment, just like how you watch a TV show, I just want to focus on one task at a time. We do so many things at once. So that TV show is important. And then read before bed. That sounds like a great night.
Yeah, and questions like these, if you have novice learners, you can definitely simplify the type of question that you ask. But even something like this, just to kind of start your lesson, or if you need just like a little break in the middle, really seeing, if students can respond or how, they're able to respond in the target language. Okay, a lot of them, will really get excited. Sometimes, mine is just as simple as, do you like something like a recent movie or a TV show? They all want to share, they all want to answer. And so, depending on the level, depending on your learners, okay, you can turn, a question like this, into a discussion, especially if you have visuals or different pictures, things you can point to. And this is something, that the students can really get excited about that can be tied, to your lesson or your content area.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you'll get answers that will automatically help you understand the student. Like I get, as in the high school that I teach at, often I get trabajar, working. Like so many of my teenagers are working. And that tells me all that I need to know is that they're going to be tired in the morning if they're in my early class. They're going to be checking their schedule. They might take a shift if they're in my fourth block. And in third block, they're probably going to be hungry because that's the lunch class. So when I have that student that answers that, it gives you that, if you read the patterns, it gives you that automatic ability to show them some grace, to work with them, to know anticipate what they'll need, what they will need. Let's see. And I think we have one more. Allow my cats to cuddle with me as I watch Netflix. Yes. Yeah. Bertha and I were talking about that the other week about I have my fuzzy blanket. I have my candles. It's all sensory. That's so important. And I love that too, because that's a nonverbal activity. We talk so much as teachers, so much. And so allowing our other senses to take over is really important for balance. Reading or listening to music. I was right there with you the other night. I had to put my headphones on. My toddler, he was on another level. And so I'm like, yes, baby, with my headphones on as I listen to the music. Yeah, again, like we do so much in a day. All these activities are important. All right, I think we're ready for the next slide, Angela?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Okay. So we are going to get a little bit more academic here, and we're going to look at the difference between stereotypes, implicit bias, and microaggressions. And I'll go ahead and tell you, this is a trick slide. There may not be just one answer. They might all blend together. Let's see what you think. So we are looking at, we're going to call this professor, Professor X. So this is Christiana's professor. And this is the professor's opinion when she walks in and for what they see as distracted. So one opinion, students now are always on their phones. Would that be a stereotype, implicit bias, a microaggression? To have that statement for Christiana, always on their phones.
Roxana says it's a stereotype.
Absolutely. I mean, because phones are our lifelines. Yeah. Like our calendars, our timers, our health is on our phones nowadays. And so to have that attitude, students are always on their phones. Well, everybody is. Yeah, definitely a stereotype. Okay. All right. Angela, you want to pick the next one?
Sure. All right. Let's go to this one. Christiana is just lazy.
Ooh.
Microaggression, stereotype, or implicit bias?
Okay, people in the chat like Luisa and Amina are saying implicit bias.
Okay.
Absolutely. Notice on this prompt, we gave you no demographic information on Christiana. And so when you see that and you have no description, you have no idea who this fictional person is, right away you can recognize, hey, that's implicit bias. You don't know that she's lazy. That's how you feel. Great point. All right, let's look at the pink sticky note. She should just drop out and go to a community college.
Okay, I see microaggression popped up in the chat.
Yeah, I agree. That's if that's a statement made to another colleague, it's just something that does not need to be said or thought. Students can be listening, like you don't know how you could offend the colleague. I find a lot of time in education, like we'll have conversations about the culture of poverty, and yet we forget that we can be talking to educators who grew up in poverty. I'm one of them. And so when you come up and you make statements like that, like that's an ouch. And we want to remove the hostile impacts if we're really establishing social emotional learning in a school setting. All right. All right. You want to read the next one, Angela?
I can, yes. Okay, how about this one? I expected better from someone her age. Okay, stereotype seems pretty popular with this one.
I would say that's implicit bias too, because you're bringing everything that you think for somebody their age to have accomplished. And again, when we talk about things that are outside of our control, like socioeconomic status, challenges that happen, health situations, it shows a lot more about what that person thinks themselves, the high standards they hold themselves to, than that actual student that needs support in the classroom.
Yeah, and as we think about, these prompts, I know we've tailored it to, the college university setting, but I'm sure, you can easily think of how this can apply, in your own classroom, in your own setting, because I know for myself, I have thought these things and I may have, verbalized these things before, really realizing the impact that it has. And so now I'm much more conscious about, how I frame things or how I think about and look at situations. And so, I've been really grateful for, this social emotional learning to really help me treat students better.
Absolutely. I think it's important to mention how, Angela, you said, it's helped you and it's helped me, because I know I used to make some of these statements and I didn't realize how hurtful they could be. Even if it was like, oh, well, you know how students are, they're always on their phone. Or, I already know how you're, what you're like. I already know that's not gonna get done. So, things like that. And it's a lot of unlearning that's happening and just being more reflective ourselves of what comes out of our mouth towards the students as well. Because again, like you mentioned, we never know who's listening and how our words are going to affect them and their perception of us as well.
That's a really good point, Bertha, because I feel like with the next one, the green sticky note, Christiana isn't taking my course seriously. Like that's a common one. I think we probably have all said, you're not taking this seriously. And if we remember all the steps that it takes to show up to a classroom, all the steps that it takes to send an email to let you know that I'm going to be out. Like you can't fully say that the student's not taking it seriously. As long as that dialogue is going on between you and the student, there's some buy-in, there's commitment. And if there isn't any conversation happening, that could be a serious situation. So until you ask, you don't know. So you can't make assumptions.
Exactly.
And then go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, are we ready for the last one?
I think so.
Okay, and it says Christiana should eat before class.
I want to hear from the fellow educator who was pregnant finishing her degree just like me.
That was me. Yeah, I had a full-time job. It was the last class I needed to get my degree, and I was already working full-time. And the class was like 2 hours, and we would have a break. I would put my head down and go to sleep, and I would put my head up again, and the professor was already going on, with the next part. And never the professor made me feel like I was not interested or nothing at all. I don't think I did eat in the class, but I know I took longer than usual for the little break that he gave us.
That's great. I'm glad that you had a positive interaction. I've mostly had positive interactions when I was pregnant through 2 of my degrees for my 2 sons. But I did have some hostile interactions as well, where the same expectations were placed on me for me to hold this, for me to do that, for me to come in with this, for me to do that. And I'm like, when you're pregnant, you're out of breath, first of all. So let's break it back down to my physical state of being. Let's have realistic expectations. And there was one professor that left me in tears, just left me in tears, because I was like, how can I finish this? But I came in the next day with my students. They saw I was upset. And because I had that social emotional learning connection with them, even though they had my middle schoolers at the time, they had acted up for the professor coming in to observe me. They took me so seriously the next day. And no disrespect to that professor, but they said, Miss Hein, we don't need her. We need you. You're here to teach us Spanish. And I was like, you guys, I appreciate the love. I don't want you to be hostile toward her as well. But it was just that moment, you know, where there's this expectation that is so unrealistic. And it wasn't only for me being a pregnant teacher and a student, it was also for my middle schoolers. What she was looking for to happen, it just wasn't happening that day in middle school. All right.
Yeah, and I moved that one to the middle because everything that you all were saying could fit any one of those three: stereotype, microaggression, implicit bias. And it just, really just made me think, how, I've learned and grown so much as an educator from just using these strategies and just really listening to the students and really just kind of understanding where they're coming from, so that we can just really have just a better environment. And so just listening to you all, have this conversation just really makes me think back, like, wow, what was I doing?
Yeah. And the stereotypes, the microaggressions, implicit bias, they always say more about the person who's holding on to it, the person who's saying these things, making these decisions. It says so much more about that person than it does the person who's receiving them. So Christiana, like Professor X can think all of these things about Christiana, and we still know nothing about Christiana, not until a conversation starts. All right, I think we're ready for the next one.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we have I know this is popular on social media. You might have seen it already, but this is a graphic that Angela and I really enjoy because it has reality, what students face, equality, what equality means, everybody gets the same, versus equity, everybody doesn't need the same. Like how we had our conversations about when you have different health conditions in the classroom, you don't need the same as the other person whose health is totally different than yours. And then justice asks us to remove the fence, to remove the boundaries, to remove that we need all these additional added supports, and to create a new system where everybody can step in equally. Okay. So Angela, did you want to say what the final prompt was on this one? I don't want to take all the talking time.
Oh, no, you go ahead and I'll chime in.
Okay, so what do you think for SEL? How can SEL impact your classroom? How can we move beginning steps SEL from how we talked about from regulation to empowerment? How is SEL connected to justice? What can you see in your classroom happening? What kind of transformation? Or even it could be a personal transformation, because to do social and emotional learning work, you have to dig deep in yourself before you can guide someone else.
I wanted to say that I find it, I struggle with what you mentioned of boundaries versus, no, you said empowerment versus regulating the student. And I believe there has to be some time in a middle ground where we have to help the students self-regulate, because you mentioned several examples, and I know they're just examples. But okay, so the student comes in and doesn't even acknowledge you, doesn't say, please give me a pencil or this or that. And I think as teachers, even as parents, we have to, you can be upset, but you still have to be polite. You still have to say please and thank you, or can I be excused for a minute? I need to take a break, but not, I feel like sometimes we, the teachers, are like the target of all their problems or whatever, but they also have to learn to self-regulate and to follow the simplest of procedures and structures in the classroom. And yes, they can feel poorly and we can help them overcome that, but it sounded like it's either empowerment or regulating them. I think there has to be an in-between step.
I think that's a really good point. And as a high school teacher, I've definitely had difficult classes where the buy-in was really hard to follow, like you said, the simplest of procedures. And so what I did on day one is I didn't come in and state the rules. I had my rules in mind. I knew what I wanted the class to do, but instead we make a community set of norms. And so I show them our proficiency. How can we go from here to this proficiency? What do we realistically need to do? And so we'll set those goals where they'll say, well, you can't be on your phone because you said listening in Spanish is the most important. well, you have to be on class on time because you said that we have to do this every day. We have to spend 400 hours to even be fluent. So we have to be here on time. And so I find that when you connect what you're doing with social emotional learning directly to the proficiency, and when you get that student buy-in for, I want to improve my goals of my proficiency, I want to speak in Spanish, that having them self-regulate is a little bit easier. But again, they're still children. You're absolutely right. They're still children. And how you said, following the simplest of procedures, I can relate to that as a teacher and a parent. And there's going to be bad days. There's going to be bad days. But at the end of the day, I feel like my decision is, I know educators often say, is this the hill I want to die on? That's a common phrase.
Mhm.
But for me, I think of, is this the thing that will either build our relationship? Will it destroy our relationship? And so if it is something so dangerous, or even just, like it's completely disrupts your classroom, absolutely. The school has systems, we've got referrals, we've got, each school has different thing that you have to do, like skipping, that's a safety issue. If a student is skipping my class, I'm going to do the SEL things. I'm going to email and everything, but I'm responsible for somebody else's beautiful child. So I'm going to have to write that referral to admin to say, I don't know where this child was during my class. Does that make sense? Because I don't want it to sound like we're only saying you have to empower, because with empowerment also comes that self-regulation.
Yes.
And
Yes. And also too,
go ahead, Angela.
Oh yeah,
No.
with I put the sticky note there, says I see my students becoming more community oriented, and this didn't happen overnight. Like it took several weeks and months, and even now I have one student who is still struggling to really think about this classroom as a community instead of this is just I'm doing what I want to do. And so I really like how we mentioned that it not only has to be this binary between both. We do have to find that middle ground, because there are times you do have to give consequences, and you have to follow up on what you say you're going to do, because if you don't, then yes, the students will get away and they will run all over you. And so yes, it's not just either or. And so I really agree with that comment.
And I agree with, I'm gonna chime in, and I agree with what Rebekah said. When I go into my classroom, I go with my rules. I have my rules, and what I have them do at the beginning, well, the first day I talk about me, because I want to be vulnerable and I want to disclose everything I possibly can about me in the target language. And we may do a brain break, just kind of easing them into everything. And then a couple days in, I actually tell them about my rules, and I have them do little skits of like what's an example of a positive with that rule, and what's a skit of a negative with that rule. So they know what they're doing, whether it's like they know they're following the rule and they know if they're breaking the rule. But just so that they don't have any doubt at the beginning of the school year, I do that. And I also do this at the end of the school year, and I use those videos for next year as well. So I do like the QR codes, and I use those videos to introduce that for the rules for next year. And it means so much to the students next year if they see their peers or they see upperclassmen just setting an example for the rules for my classroom. Now, after, I'm doing rules, I do introduce rules, but also I do a lot of engagement, a lot of activities, a lot of community building. These kids, to the point that these kids will do anything for me. So I think a lot of it has to do in the relationship we build with them. And then, for example, if I have a guest, they know they're supposed to be on their best behavior. Like they're always in okay behavior, but if I have a guest, they know that it's, they're going to be an even better behavior. And they always, they will always tell me, we did it for you and things like that. But I think it's because I allow them to be themselves. And I think that, at least for my high schoolers, that means the world, that they can be themselves. And there are certain rules that I personally, they're not a big deal to me. And, and I guess, one time somebody did tell me somebody was eating in your class, but that's not a rule breaker for me. The kid was hungry. The kid needs to, as long as it's not like they're not eating fish or anything that's like loud smell, and they're not making noise the way they're eating, and the rule is that they don't leave me crumbs and that I don't see ants or things like that. And that's that will be a rule that I kind of just let go. But that obviously I'm not telling you to do the same. That's it's just an example, because I mean, high schoolers are hungry all the time. And again, it has to do a lot with, we do want to establish the rules. We want to enforce the rules. And I'll give you another quick example. Towards the end of the last night, we just went on spring break. So the last 2 weeks of spring break, I was kind of very tired. And I just kind of, I would start seeing phones pop up more and more. And I was not like, telling them to put them off or whatever. Just kind of let it go. I did not want to pick that battle at that time because I was too tired. But I did mention the last 2 days before spring break, rest and reset, because when we come back, I will give you one nice warning and then I'm going to pick up your phone. And I'm following through with that again, because we have 6 weeks left of school, and that's a lot of learning time. So I just made that very clear to them. And now they have been, I don't want to use the word warned, but yes, they have, I have had the conversation with them about like, you're not following this, this is the expectation and you don't need to be on your phone in order to learn. So therefore, if you're on it, I already told you very nicely, and it is very rude that you're on your phone when I am pouring my heart into this lesson. And that's kind of how I handle that. So but they still know at the end of the day that we're doing it for, the best outcome, because we want them to acquire the language, and that can't happen if they're distracted on their phone.
I want to add, because when you're in a classroom, those are all great points, Bertha. I agree with everything that you're saying. And I want to add that when you're in a classroom, you're dealing with so many dynamics at once. So when I make this comment, I'm making it not only as a teacher to kids from different personal home lives at once, I'm also a parent in a blended family, and I am constantly all day long living with different expectations. This is okay here, this isn't okay here. And so how do you navigate that? And I think what Bertha said about, I state my expectation and I follow through. And I'm a big fan because I can't keep up with all of it. So I'm a big fan of natural consequences. If we're taking a quiz and you're on your phone, I use go formative, locked, grade is in the grade book, high schooler, when tutorial is, I'll see you then. So you can come up with those natural consequences that will flow. And so they know the expectation. I love nonverbal, nonverbal approaches. So if they're on their phone, they're going to get the notification from Power School, Hein, 0, Spanish 2. And then they put it down, Miss Hein, will you please reopen my assignment? I want to finish it in the next 10 minutes. So if you are struggling, I'm not saying that you are, like Bertha said, you don't have to listen to anything we're saying. You're the expert, your students. But there's just some examples of ways where hopefully it's not such a fight, but some days it will be. Some days, some days are hard.
Yeah, and I like to, have that conversation with the student, pull them to the side, or you can pull them in the hall and say, hey, I noticed that you were doing, whatever it was you were doing. And then I give them the opportunity to respond. And they always know, I can certainly, call home, email parents, but I'm not just going to let you get by with doing this once you know what the expectations are. And so, that's going to look different for every teacher, every situation, every learner. And so, you just really have to know your students, know your families, know which parents, you need to call, or do you need to text right away, or, just really have that open line of communication. And if it needs to go, outside of the class, like say to a counselor or to an administrator, you certainly, should follow through with that.
There is one more question on the chat. Myra is asking it. It says caring versus policing. I hear you kind of touching on it, but will you give us some go-to strategies for when we find ourselves policing? So how, when we realize, oh man, we're policing. So what can we do? How can we shift, I guess?
I want to add, the moment that you feel angry, the moment that you feel out of control, more than likely you're policing. If you are not calm, if you cannot take this moment and let it flow like water, you're probably policing. To give you a concrete example, when I know Bertha mentioned some rules that they're just not as important to her because learning is the most important rule in her classroom. I witnessed one student and a teacher, and the student was pregnant. I witnessed this male teacher get into a shouting match with her over her hoodie. And there are so many other things at play there. They were also both different races. And I think about that moment often before I walk into my school day, because that child was yelled at for having a hoodie on, though she was quiet, she was ready to learn and everything. And that teacher lost control and wouldn't even let her sit in his classroom and learn until I had walked her to the principal, got a note signed, completely wasted everybody's time. So if you feel that you are getting out of control, that it's making you angry and you're having an emotional reaction, then there's not social emotional learning happening. Because if you're there to guide, like how we just talked about empowerment versus regulation, we know that when we have our emergency task forces, they're there to regulate. This must stop. This has to stop. You are not safe. So that response is there for dangerous situations. If a child, like Bertha said, is eating in class, is that a moment to get angry? Is that a moment to feel like they are in danger? Is it to say, hey, I just have a rule, no food. Do you mind just pulling a chair out in the hallway? Because rules are rules and I want to be consistent for everybody. Or, hey, you want to come in my classroom 5 minutes early? Bring your food, eat before everybody gets in here, etc. Angela, did you want to add?
Yeah, and so I find, at least with my middle schoolers, just having a choice, but really the choice is what I want you to do. And so I frame it as, would you like to do this now? Or would you like to stay inside during brain break when everybody's outside and do this? And a lot of times they'll get the message that, hey, I might need to stop and do what she's asking me to do. And so you can always maybe kind of frame it the way that you really want, the student to do it. And you don't have to, make it seem like, oh, you're going to stay inside and do this during brain break, but really kind of send the message that, hey, I see you, I don't like what you're doing, but you have a choice in this moment, and how you decide to respond is also going to determine my response. And so I find that that's been really effective with at least 7th grade this year.
And I'll add, in high school, it might even look a little bit more intense. By intense, I mean a little bit harsher, the words that I'm saying, but not the delivery. I'll say, okay, so do you want to pass Spanish with me now? You know me as your teacher, you know my expectations, or do you want to take it in summer school? Do you want to pay the money? Do you want to, and just showing them the reality. You can do either choice. You can get to graduation either choice, but do you want to pick this, the safety zone that you know now? And so even just having that conversation in a gentle way can be like, you're right, who's teaching summer school? I'll be like, not me, baby, not me. I don't know. And they'll be like, let me do my work.
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for spending an hour. We did an hour and 11 minutes, but that is no problem. But thank you so much, and everybody, for being here today. I just wanted to remind you, I did post on the chat the link for the feedback survey. Please feel free to put some feedback in there for all the sessions. If you go back and you watch some past sessions, please complete the feedback survey for that. It really helps being able to continue to provide these types of sessions to you. And we're going to have our last session for this school year next month. So I will be sending you the information for that. And that will be our last session. But I also I sent you an email, and I know several of you already opened it and checked it out. I thought it would be easier to create a page where you could find all the recordings in one place and all the links in one place. And not only that, the World Languages, Georgia Department of Education, World Languages Initiative, they want to get this information and this resources and this sessions to as many people as possible. So Luisa, I know you asked me, can I share with others? Feel free to share the link, and everything is in there already. So if you have other friends who are interested, I mean, we have done so many topics. We've done proficiency, we did chat maths with Amy Leonard, we did crafting lesson plans with Claudia Elliott, we did scaffolding for success. We talked about engaging and why students disengage. We have all these topics, and they are all available for you to watch and replay as well. So feel free to share the link with everybody else. The only thing we ask, honestly, is that you complete a feedback survey if you do happen to watch a recording or attend a live session. And we are so grateful, and thank you for your time, Rebekah and Angela. So we had a blast today. And it is just amazing to be able to think about these things, because I know, as I mentioned, you know, and I think Caroline was saying, I'm guilty of that. And some other people were saying, I'm guilty, I've done that. We all done it. I don't think there's anybody here who hasn't, you know, made some statement that probably was not the best statements towards the students. It's just a matter of honestly kind of just being aware of that and doing better moving forward. And you know, just making 1 or 2 changes here and there, little by little, and then, you know, we continue to grow and we continue to serve our students much better. So thank you, ladies. I don't know if you have any words before we all log out.
I want to thank everybody for being here. It's nearly 8 o'clock. I know many of us are, you know, will be already in the classroom in 12, 13 hours again. So thank you so much for taking time. And I noticed there were more questions in the chat. And I just want to say, if our session gave you more questions than answers, perfect. We did our job. We absolutely did our job. So keep reflecting on those questions and see what works for your school, your community, your grade level. Research, reach out, and I hope you come to the other sessions that Bertha hosts.
Yeah, and again, just thank you all so much for having us. You know, this is a presentation that we're really passionate about, and, you know, we really are learning and growing. And so, you know, I just encourage you to just, you know, try one thing, you know, try one strategy, what works for you, what works for your students. And if you really are into it, then maybe add another the next week, or, you know, just go slow. You don't feel like you have to do it all at once. I know that at first that's how I felt, but, you know, I just really thank you for spending this evening with us and hope to see you soon.
All right. Bye, everybody. Take care. Rest up. Bye-bye.